Basketball. Objectives at the end of the lesson, the learner should be able to understand the basketball history, facilities and equipment, basketball position and roles, and basic rules. To appreciate the importance of knowing the rules and applicable equipment in basketball. To execute their basic knowledge in basketball. Good morning, class! Who wants to lead the prayer? No one wants to lead the prayer? Okay, I will call who will leading a prayer today. De La Cruz, you may lead a prayer. Stand up, please. Thank you, De La Cruz. You may take your seat. Now, let's check the attendance and the uniform of the class. As I call your name, stand up and say present. When I call your surname, please stand up and tell to us do you remember last meeting. Let us call Francisco to share what he remember about the topic last meeting. Stand up, please. Wow, that's very impressive. Thank you, Francisco. All Francisco said is correct. We should balance and measure how strong we should give in the ball when we smash it, and also to make sure it will pass it in the net of opponent. Before our discussion and give you insight on what is lesson for today. But before that, I will show a picture and get what is it. Understand? Ready? First picture. Yes? That's correct. Okay, next picture. That's correct. Okay, next picture. That's correct. Okay, next picture. Yes? That's correct. Okay, next picture. Yes? That's correct. Okay, next picture. Yes? That's correct. Okay. Very good, student. And now, what did you notice in the picture and what is it for? Yes, stand up. You may take your seat. That's correct. That is equipment of basketball. First, I will discuss the history of basketball. Basketball was invented in 1891 by Dr. James Naismith, a Canadian Scotch descent at Springfield College, Massachusetts. That you can see, he is Dr. James Naismith. The college was the international YMCA training school, and the games was invented to provide an indoor activity for training YMCA leaders. When the game first played, pitch basketball were nailed up each end of the gymnasium as goals, hence origin of the name basketball. So, what is YMCA? YMCA is Young Men's Christian Association. From the word men's, it is all from all men. They believe girls is not allowed to play it. It is response to unhealthy social condition brought on by the industrial revolution of men's. I ask a question if you're really listening. Who is invented and what year? Yes? What is YMCA? Yes? Very good. Facilities and equipment of basketball. Number 1 is the backboard. Made of transparent glass in professional court. But sometimes in barangays, court, it will be a wood. That you can see in your barangay, right? It is a wood. Okay. It is measured 6 feet wide, 6 feet wide, and 3.5 feet tall. If it is 6 feet wide and 3.5 tall. And number 2, basketball. Made in synthetic such as a rubber, polyester, and nylon in combination with leather. The pressure of the ball must be between 7.5 and 8.5. That's so heavy for a square inch. That's so heavy. And the size of the ball measure 29.5 inch around circumferences. That is measure of the ball. I don't have the ball here, so number 3 is basketball ring. Consists of backboard, rim, net, and metal post that holds them up in the air. That you can see in the picture, that is the basketball ring. That is metal and net. That everyone can shoot the ball. Number 4 is a basketball shot clock. A shot clock is a device that is used to keep track on the amount of time the two opponents is allowed to have the ball. The shot clock lasts 24 seconds. Every time we hold the ball, there's only have the 24 seconds in every each team to shoot the ball. If ever the shot clock is times up and you shouldn't shoot it, that will not be allowed to score or additional point to your team. Number 5 is court. A regulation basketball court is 50 feet wide and 94 feet long. This gives a player a correct amount of space to shot, pass, and score the basketball. So that it means that the court is have 50 feet wide and 94 feet long. So every team has the right to shoot their ball in their proper space or ring that we can shoot the ball. They have a center that will show this is their limitation of what they shoot the ball is in. So the court is the ball is have a part. First is sideline. I have a picture that you can see that is a sideline. Sideline is in the outside of the court. The baseline that you can see, there's a inside of the court. Yeah. You can see the black, or sometimes it is color blue in other court. Number 3 is half court line. Yan. You can see there's the half court line. And the 4th is front line. The 5th is back line. Back court. Other. The next is 3-point shot. This is the most important to know, the 3-point shot. The 7 is circle, center circle. Like I said earlier, this is the center circle is before we start the game. The player we have a representative to catch up the ball to the referee when it is going to throw it. Number 8, the paint, also known as the lane, key and free roll line. Okay? Basketball position and roles. Center or the center is usually the team tallest and strongest player and is positioned under the basket. Number 2, power forward, or we can call that is power forwards, are usually the second tallest in the team, are the closest to the center in the term of physical attribution and playing style but the most speed. The center is like I said earlier, the center where when we start the game, when we have a center in the court, there is centers is the representative to catch the ball, to play, and you can shoot the ball. The small forward and the next is the small forward and the small forwards. It's usually the shorter or the two forwards on the team but plays the most versatile role out of the main five position. Shooting guard or potentially the shortest player on the team. The shooter guard is the team best outside shooters beside being able to shoot well. The shooting guard needs to be good at dribbling, passing, and having court vision by seeing the court because the score of the team is I can call that is by him, is located to her, to him, and the ball is always to her, to him, always to him, to and the other player also to guard. The next is the point guard. The point guard is especially the shortest but the best ball handler on the team, also known as coach of the floor or the floor general. A point guard is responsible to directing plays. It is also when we call that as the floor manager is the manager, coach. He is giving a sign of what we should do the next target, or will be positioned to distract the opponents. This is the next example video of basic position of roles. Watch everyone.
I'm your favorite host, Little Dribble. Good to finally be here and talk to all of you from the Basketball U family. Welcome back to your favorite channel. I know you came back for a little bit more knowledge, and that's why we're here, and that's what we're going to give you. So far, we learned the history of basketball in the men's game, the women's game, and internationally. We also gave you the ABCs of basketball, and we broke down some court measurements for you as well. So it's important to know that we'll be breaking down positions in basketball this time because at an early age, usually players typically get put in positions based on size. And our current state of basketball is almost becoming a game where it's sort of positionless because the taller players that you ordinarily see down low in the post positions playing centers or power forwards are now playing the point guard and shooting guard positions. We will talk about all of that shortly, but remember, it's a game where now you can just develop your skills and find your niche based on your growth as you move forward in the game of basketball, opposed to being in a position because you're really tall or another position because you're extremely small. In my years of getting dribbled up and down the court and watching players develop, I think it's important that you not only develop your skills physically, but mentally, as this will give you an advantage to play multiple positions instead of being put in a specific category when you have a certain physical skill set. Parents out there, if you're trying to teach your kid watching this video, it's important that you take a little bit of each skill set from each position so it gives your son or daughter the ability to play in different areas of the court and even the positions. Don't forget, coming at you every day, we have Basketball U. for you and only for you. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and make it a discussion that everyone can talk about. If you have any questions, hit your guy up, Little Dribble, and we will make sure if I don't answer your questions, somebody else will. All right? So don't be afraid to hit us up and follow all our social medias on Twitter, on Instagram. And then we got even a little blog that just keeps you up to date with a couple different things we're doing and some other fun things to check out. Back to talking about the positions and the most important thing to make the game of basketball go. First, we have the point guard position. The point guard position is an interesting position because it's almost like football where it's the quarterback of the team. The communication, the ability to call plays, the ability to move players around is very important in the point guard role. One thing that's important is the point guard is an extension of the coach because of the way it sets up plays and it controls the team. The point guard brings the ball up the court and directs traffic, and it makes decisions ideally that result in high percentage shots. Now, as I give you a breakdown of the point guard, there's going to be different types of point guards that you will see when you watch professional basketball and even some college basketball as well. And those will be explained in a little bit more detail as I finish the description. Now, on offense, remember, point guards need the ability to drive the lane so they can create scoring opportunities for their teammates. They also need to have a solid mid-range jump shot, which we discussed what that area is and what those dynamics look like, and as well as the three. On defense, they can focus on guarding other teams' best ball handler, but also getting into the passing lane for steals as well. Another thing that the point guard does win on defense, they always communicate what defense is being ran, because sometimes the defense varies on the different team's skill set. The point guards are typically the shortest player on the court. However, that isn't always the case with every player. As long as you have the necessary skills, you can play the position no matter how tall you are. Now that we've talked about the basics of what a point guard does, let's break down the skills and attributes needed to play the position. Most importantly, the point guard is trusted with taking care of the basketball. And by doing this, he or she has the best ability to handle the ball. So ball handling is the first attribute that we'll talk about. A point guard should have the ability to go both ways. That's with the right hand and the left hand, with a strong, confident dribble, and protecting it with being close to the body, and also the ability to maneuver with the ball efficiently, whether it's using moves across or over behind the back or through the legs, or whatever you consider a move that might be flashy. But at the end of the day, they're all effective and they're moves to protect the ball and to confuse the defender, which will create some scoring opportunities in other positions. Passing is an important factor for the point guard position because while being able to set somebody up in scoring position, a lot of times there's just an initial pass in youth basketball to get rid of the ball to create a sense of safeness or to move without the ball. A lot of times the pass isn't made to set up a teammate in a scoring position. In doing so, when we talk about the point guards that were really good at passing, one thing that you should recognize is when they are driving, when they are making a pass, it's always for a play to be made by another skilled player. Quickness is important in this position because it's more about being skilled with your quickness and having your first step and the ability to understand how to change speeds at the point guard position, which will all be talked about in training videos here in the future. Using a great demonstration of players on these different clips allows you to understand exactly what I'm talking about currently. Communication, I think, is important at every single position, but mainly at the point guard position because the responsibility of communicating to each player in their position, making sure they're in the right spots, and they're effectively moving around so that the coach's play or strategy works at that certain time of the game. Now, rebounding isn't that important due to where they're usually positioned on the court, but just because you're more in the perimeter and more around the wings, you still have to be in a position of safety where if we do miss a shot, you get back in order to make sure that what we talked about in ABCs of basketball, a fast break, doesn't happen. Now, it's important for the point guard to be able to guard multiple positions because he or she can typically be a pesky defender and cause a little havoc for the other team's other position players, as being smaller, getting under taller players, you can cause turnovers. Now, with that ability, it takes a sense of composure. And composure is a skill that can be more valuable than all the past skills that I just discussed with you. Composure controls the team as well as the flow of your offensive attack and the game as a whole for your team. Now, the last quality we think that's important with the point guard position is unselfishness. The game of basketball is so stat driven now that kids are watching their favorite players at this position and they think that they have to score on an average of a lot of points to be an effective point guard for their team. But in all reality, distributing the ball and being an unselfish player in that manner, and also talking to players and helping them understand their role, now that we've broken down the skills, is the attribute that's most important. And we're going to talk about what type of point guards are in today's game by giving you an example of some names that you're familiar with and what their abilities are. Now, going over your typical point guard positions and what they do with their different abilities, we'll go over just a couple players that basically highlight the position the way that people see the game now. First thing to talk about is the scoring point guard. Scoring point guards are definitely point guards that just light it up. I mean, they make passes here and there and they do all the different skills that we talked about as far as communication and running the team, but their main job is to score. And a long time ago, there were players like Isaiah Thomas, Tim Hardaway, Steve Francis, Nick Van Exel, Penny Hardaway, that were just point guards that just lit it up. And now we have players like Stephen Curry, Kyrie Irving, Russell Westbrook, that'll just give you 40 on any given night. So those are always exciting players to watch. Now you have the ability that is what we talked about for the last attribute, which is the unselfish point guard that makes all the passes. Now these point guards are typically very close to being your MVPs of the league, and a lot of times some of the best players in the league as well. And just to go back in time, we have Magic Johnson, who was typically your unorthodox point guard because he was 6'9". That was a very big deal and a very big point guard for a long time ago. And then you have your classic assist leader in the NBA, and that's John Stockton. And then other names that you might be familiar with are like a Rajon Rondo, Steve Nash, and Jason Kidd. Now, they passed the ball with precision and also did it with a little flair, which, the fans did love to watch. Moving along to everyone's favorite thing to do in the game of basketball, that's shoot. Now, hopefully when you shoot the ball, you score. The shooting guard is a position that a lot of people want to play, and there's a lot of pressure in the position. But people don't realize the bulk of responsibility that's put on them when they have to score the majority of the points. Sometimes the sole base of your team winning is whether or not you're hitting shots, and other teams plan to strategically stop you, but they cannot because of your ability. As the name suggests, shooting guards need to be able to put the ball in the hoop. It's very simple, but do more than just knock down shots. They have strong off-ball movement when it comes to running through screens and finding open spaces for scoring opportunities, as well as being able to have some ball handling skills. While they don't need to be as skilled as the point guard, these two guards are typically the secondary ball handler, and having this skill allows them to make shot attempts off the dribble, as well as help run a play successfully for the team when the point guard doesn't have the ball in their hand. With that all being said, here are some skills that shooting guards need to have to be successful in their position. Defense is an important component when being a shooting guard because not only are you the best scorer on the team, but you're usually going to have to guard the best player because now they're playing the same scoring position you are. Typically, you are a better defender when being in the shooting guard position because you understand how to play defense on somebody moving without the ball. Also being able to put the ball on the floor and shoot off the dribble. So with all those abilities, you can understand what that other player wants to do. In our current game right now, shooting guards range from about 6'4" to about 6'10". And this allows them to be an effective defender with their ability to move like a smaller player, but also with added length. Because of that length, they're also expected to rebound that basketball, even though they score it a lot. So even though you have the idea of being a scorer, rebounds are just as important as we want to limit possessions. But that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. Now, one in particular that kind of did all of these different attributes that we're talking about is the greatest in the game. Yeah, that's right. That is right. Michael Jordan. Yes, Michael Jordan. He was a legendary player that we'll definitely go over at some point in time in basketball. If you don't know about him, look him up. His ability to move without the ball, his defense, his athleticism, all played a role in making him one of the greatest of all time. Then you have examples that, they just score it, like Tracy McGrady, Dwayne Wade, Lou Williams, and you might be familiar with James Harden, the Beard. Yeah, he gets it done too, at a very high rate. And this is someone who really dribbles, they move without the ball, they just kind of have a full package of skills. When you go back to your traditional shooting guards that got it done effectively with barely putting the ball on the ground, we have to talk about players like the villain Reggie Miller, the clutch game-winning champion Ray Allen, and also the 3-time champion Klay Thompson. Now, these are all extremely good shooters, and they leave fans in awe with their ability to score so many points without really putting the ball on the floor. That typically wraps up what the shooting guard does, and that is one of the most exciting positions in the game.
Lil Dribble has to refuel with more energy as he calls this timeout. You know how the point guard...
Okay. Now, basic rules of basketball. Any player possessing the ball cannot stay inside the full ring of the court with his back to the basket for more than 3 seconds. They cannot stay in on the court of the opponents. They need to locate to their side of court to not count it of 3. No player should touch the ball, basket, or trim's rim while a ball is passing through the basket. They should understand that ball first should touch the net. They have a right to catch up or touch it, even though the ball is under the top of the net. Next, players are allowed to make a brief contact with an opposing player, trying to pass the ball or make a goal, but cannot obstruct them. Next, player making more than 5 fouls are removed from the game because this is a really because when you are fouled, do you have a foul or you're going hurting someone of opponents, or are you fighting with other opponents? That's a foul. Or you're touching the ball even though it's not yours. Number 5 is pause as per the situation. Get free throw to the opposing team and ball is handed over the team. When you foul, and the person you foul will have a free throws to their side of the court that will giving a 1 point or 2 points. It is even it's decided of the referee if it's 1 point shoot or 2 point shoot. Player cannot carry the ball with team and walk or run. This is called traveling. You cannot hand carry your ball. All you need to do is the ball is always on the you're always dribbling it. Don't always hand it. You always need to dribbling for that is not that good. When a player is surrounded by opponents within the 1 meter radius trying to get hold of the ball, he cannot have the ball more than 5 seconds. Such players considered to be close grounded. Player of the team possessing the ball shouldn't stay in the restricted area of the opponent's team for more than 3 seconds. They should shoot the ball before the shot clock ticks. Like I said earlier, the clock is only at 24 seconds. What a basketball player should not do. A player should not throw a ball away from the court boundaries because the court has the boundaries like under the base. Number 2, that we should not step on the foul line while throwing a ball. Number 3, step on the end or sideline while passing the ball to a teammate. Number 3, to kick a ball. Like I said, I remember always dribbling your ball. Number 5 is dribbling or hit the ball with their fist. Don't do that. It is going to foul you. Double dribbling the ball. Always dribble the ball one. Always dribble and catch, dribble and catch, dribble and catch, dribble and hold, dribble and hold, dribble and hold. Hold the ball and stay in the back court that contains their basket for more than 8 seconds. Else, the team responsible should bear a foul. Any clarification? This is the video that will show you really on how to play basketball.
Today I'm going to show you how to dribble a basketball for beginners. I'm going to give you some things that will instantly improve your handles, as well as give you progressions that you can go into, so as you start getting things down, you can keep advancing your ball handling ability. Coach Jesse Minchie with Get Handles Basketball, where I show you how to play like the pros. Click that subscribe button and click that little bell icon. Very first key tip we got to pay attention to when it comes to dribbling the basketball is don't do that. Don't slap the basketball. Sometimes I see players when they're starting, they'll slap the basketball, but most players know better. But they don't maximize that pushing motion. So what you want to focus on when you're dribbling is having what I call a high ball in hand time. When you're dribbling, you want the basketball in your hand for as long of the dribble motion as possible. This is a low ball in hand time. Notice how the basketball is kind of floating on its own, this whole space here. If I get my hand lower on the release of the dribble and the catch of the dribble, that's a higher ball in hand time. So we want to try to get a high ball in hand time, and we want to make sure we're pushing the basketball, gripping the basketball with our fingers wide on it, dig into the basketball a little bit so you can get a good grip. Other key tip I want to give you on this is at the end of every dribble, make sure you're snapping that wrist, especially with your dribbles where it's coming from one hand back into that same hand, so like your inside out or your regular dribble, and using that elbow joint to get some power at the end. Now when you're starting, there's a couple things you want to focus on. Number 1, working on dribbling slow, but at the very end, getting that snap on the wrist and the elbow. That'll give a good little pop to the dribble at the end so you can float it in the hand, getting you an even longer ball in hand time. But the other thing you'll want to do is also work on more quick dribbles where you're just dribbling it hard and fast, and the whole motion is snap, 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 and there's not that float in between. That'll get you sort of that different change of speed that's important. When it comes to the crossovers, it's a little bit of the wrist, not so much of the elbow, more of the shoulder that's gonna give you your power. So notice when I do my crossovers, look how my shoulders swing side to side and I snap my wrist at the end. Hands are close to each other, close to the ground, so I can have that high ball and hand time. Okay, this next tip is a weird one. It's actually gonna be a lot different than what your coach is probably teaching you, and pretty much everyone teaches their players. But I found this helps players a ton, and it's to look at the basketball. Your coaches are probably always telling you, don't ever look at the basketball when you're dribbling. You can't see what's happening on the court. I completely agree with them. But if you're having a hard time with like your between the legs dribble and it's hitting off your leg, or you're losing the basketball on your crossover and you're always trying to look up, how do you know what went wrong? You can't tell, oh, I hit my leg because I didn't swing my arm through my legs on my between legs, or I lost the basketball because I pushed it too far sideways. You can't figure those things out when you're getting started if you don't look down. It makes it a lot harder. So rep things out at first with your head looking down at the basketball until you get the feel for the move. Then when you get the feel for it, get your head up and keep it up. Next big thing to focus on is getting the butt down, feet apart. What that's gonna do is get my hands lower to the ground, right? We talked about how having a high ball and hand time is important. I can have a higher ball and hand time if my hands are lowered to the ground. Getting my butt down and thinking about sitting in a chair and getting my feet apart. If I bring my feet apart and I don't have my butt down, my hand's not very low to the ground. If I have my feet together and my butt down, my hands still aren't that low to the ground. But if I do both, boom, my hand can touch the ground here. Getting those two keys in place is gonna be important, either in the squat stance, a lunge stance, keeping those hips down. That'll also make it easier to get your between the legs dribbles down. The other variation of it is somewhere in between, which is what's called the split squat. Not quite a lunge, not quite a squat, somewhere in between. From time to time when you're playing in games, you might wanna come from upright and then drop down to sell some fakes, or come upright to put your defender to sleep and then quickly drop down to go. But for the most part, you wanna try to get in this low ready stance when you're about an arm's distance from your defender. Next big thing that you're probably gonna wanna jump into is doing more moves, right? Behind the back, spin move, between the legs, all that stuff. But before you do that, one thing that's gonna make you effective in games that's more important is your footwork. So here's a couple things you can work on. Dribbling and jabbing out with that opposite foot. Working on jabbing with the same side foot. Stepping out, stepping out, stepping out. That'll help you sell fakes. Allow you to get a good first step to start going past your defender, all of that. Key tip I want you to focus on with this is keeping that ball back though when you're doing those, right? You don't wanna have the ball come way out here where the defender can steal it, or if I'm taking this step, having the ball here where they can steal it, I'm gonna keep it behind my butt, behind this leg. Of course though, we would do it with the right hand, stepping out, stepping out. The next step you can work on is the cross body jab. Very important step. This is how I recommend most players do their first step, but it's also great for selling a fake. So if the left hand is dribbling, the right foot's gonna step to the left side. Get it long, low, and quick, okay? Like this. Then step back, step back. And then of course you would wanna work on this with the other hand, right? Just like this, okay? From there, what you can work on is scissors. Deadly setup that you can use to get past defenders, go into a bunch of different moves, and a lot of the best players in the game are great with the scissors. You can have both feet on the ground in more of a lunge stance, jump and switch leg positions. Now when you're doing it at first, you might want to jump a little bit higher just to make sure you're doing it like this and not like this. It shouldn't be two steps, it should be one hop. And when you get better and to make it work in actual games, you want to make sure you have it down where your feet are low to the ground when you do it, and you stay on the balls of your feet. So it'll look like this, okay? You could do that, of course, also with the other hand. And also notice, what am I doing with the basketball? Keeping it behind me, right? So this way it's protected. Another key tip you can focus on for all this stuff is having that off hand that's not dribbling in front of the basketball so you can protect it from defenders. We're ready to start jumping into doing some more advanced type moves. The first one is the between the legs. You want, of course, your legs apart, right? If you try to do the between the legs with your legs close together like this, you're gonna have a really hard time, right? Because there's really not a big window for the basketball to go through, and you can hit your legs. Get them apart, get the butt down. What that's gonna do is not just only give you a window, but by getting the butt down, I can now swing my hand through the legs. Imagine there's a sheet of glass between your two legs and you want to break through that glass. The basketball goes through every single time. If you don't do that, it can hit off your leg. Same things would apply with doing the reverse between the legs. So the only difference with that is you're coming from the back and bringing the ball to the front. You could again do this in all your different stances, but swinging that arm through is going to be key to making sure the basketball goes through. Behind the back. There's two ways to do your behind the back. First is to have your feet squared up like in a squat stance and push it like in a regular crossover motion. The swinging of the shoulder is gonna be the same. The wrist flick is gonna be the same. Only difference is instead of doing it here, we're just bringing the basketball back here a little bit more to swing it through. Don't drop the basketball like that soft. I see players do this all the time, and because of that, they never really have a good behind the back. They can't do it quick in games. And when you do it like that, now you have to look where the basketball is. So you gotta get in the habit of pushing the basketball hard. If you do that, after a while, you'll start to get the feel for it. Two other key tips that'll help you. When you release the basketball, slap the same side butt. If you do that, you're gonna get a good consistent release on the dribble every single time, and your body will start to get the feel and know where the basketball is gonna end up, so you don't have to look at it. Next big tip is to have the second hand that's gonna catch the dribble low to the ground, waiting to get it. So you wanna push it hard, get this hand waiting down low to catch it, and that way you can get the feel for it when it's coming into the hand. So now as it's coming up to the side of the hip here, you can have control over the basketball. The other way to do behind the back is a little bit different. This one, you actually might need to look at it from time to time. I watch the best NBA players, Steph Curry, Kyrie Irving. When they do this behind the back, almost every time they look at the basketball for a split second. So it's okay, but try not to look at it for the whole motion. What we're gonna do with this one is slap the opposite side butt. So if the left hand's doing the dribble, I'm gonna slap the right side butt so it wraps the ball more forward. This is good for more on the move to attack. The other one's good to stop quick and then read what your next best option is. This one's good for covering ground more forward. Last move I'm gonna cover for you that is a must-know move is the spin move. A lot of players get this one kind of mixed up when they're first learning it. Starting more of a protection dribble like this, so you're sideways to your defender or to the hoop, and then pull the ball back. That's a big key tip. I see players all the time, they'll switch hands here and then push. Big no-no, because if you do that, if you're my defender, you can steal the basketball as I'm completing this spin, get an easy fast break layup. So we wanna make sure when we're dribbling, we're pulling it back, same side foot comes back, and then we switch hands. And then you repeat the other way. Switch, okay? And then as you get better, you can do it starting from more squared and pulling it back. Starting more squared, pulling.
The next video is how to proper shoot up the ball. Watch carefully, everyone.
I'm gonna show you how to shoot a basketball for beginners. So the first thing you'll wanna do is actually get rid of the hoop. Now I know that might sound weird, but the reason you wanna do this is so you can make sure that you've got your form right. So I'm gonna show you some different drills and things you can do without the basketball, and then later we'll get into some stuff for the hoop. But this is all gonna make sure you got your form right. So the very first thing I'd have a beginner do is make sure they've got their shot set up the correct way. So I'm a lefty, so you just need to flip everything around. Real simple, just treat me like a mirror image. Have your shooting hand in the middle of the basketball, tight to the hip. So see how my elbow is right tight to the hip here? The other thing you wanna do is make sure you got those fingers spread wide on the basketball so you get a nice wide base. I have less control like this, but I would have better control like this. And then my other hand, I would wanna have on the side, possibly even slightly in front of the basketball. The reason for that is that will prevent having this hand become one of the shooting hands. This is just your guide hand. If I have this hand behind, I might end up flicking with that thumb or pushing with this hand or pushing the ball sideways, and that'll throw your shot off and make it so you're less consistent. There are some players that have a slight thumb flick that can get away with it and still be consistent, but it's better to eliminate any extra things if possible and have mainly the shooting hand be the hand that's doing the shooting. This hand's just help getting the basketball up there. The other thing you really need to pay attention to is your feet and your legs. So that's something that often gets overlooked when it comes to shooting. Typically, you want to keep your heels off the ground a little bit so you get a little spring into your shot. You want to have your hips loaded so you don't have to come all the way down here, but about a quarter squat here is a good position. And you want to have your feet apart. Some people like to have a little bit wider than shoulder. Some people like shoulder width. Some people like a little narrower, but you don't want to be here and you don't want to be here. You want to be somewhere within that range of shoulder width apart. The other thing you want to pay attention to is that you got your toes kind of pointing to the basket. Usually what you'll end up seeing is most shooters are gonna tilt slightly. So I'm a lefty, I would tilt my feet slightly to the right. Righties will typically tilt slightly to the left, or sometimes you'll see players bring that shooting side foot slightly forward, not really far forward, and we're not doing a really big turn, just slightly. That'll help make it easier to keep that elbow in like we talked about earlier and have that shot aligned with the hip, the foot, and the arm. You want this whole side to be aligned. A simple drill to make sure you've got this down is do one dribble and then just simply pause in that start position to make sure you got that right. Especially pay attention when your non-shooting hand is doing the dribble to make sure you're pulling it across to that shooting hand side. And then after working on a regular dribble with the left hand and the right hand, just work on a basic crossover. Do about 10-20 repetitions dribbling right hand, left hand, crossover left, and crossover right. So once you got those elements right, that we're ready to start talking about the actual release of the shot. So as we mentioned before, you want to release with just that shooting hand. A couple things you'll want to pay attention to within that. You want this guide hand to drop off right around head height. Some players will tend to do it a little lower. Usually if you're more of a beginner though, you would want to have the hand drop off right at about head height, but don't have it drop down like that. Instead, what I recommend you do is this. Keep that thumb pinned to your hand and the fingers pointing forward. That'll make sure you don't have that thumb flick interference, that you're not pushing the basketball side to side. If you're pushing it forward like this, you won't have to worry about that. With the shooting hand, you don't want to have it straight up. You don't want to have it forward. You want to just here, a little bit above straight up, slightly forward. If this was a clock, you want it about 1 or 2 o'clock. Other thing you'll notice is that shooting arm is going to extend so the elbow locks. The wrist will flick. Some players will be more firm with that wrist and keep it down. Some players will tend to kind of let it be floppy. Whatever's more comfortable for you, go with, just like we talked about with your feet earlier. Other thing you'll want to pay attention to is making this transition up to that point of release smooth. One thing that'll really help with that is as you're going into the shot from this position to bringing it up, try not to lift the ball right up here. Instead, try to have your body come under it. See how that gets my hips loaded like we talked about earlier, and it gets my hand under the basketball. So now I can start getting that force into the shot, and it makes the shot a lot more smooth versus if I just bring it up here. Now there's gonna be this awkward pause, and a lot of that energy coming up will be gone because the ball's just sitting here waiting. But if I can swoop under it into that release, it smooths everything out and makes a nice transfer of energy. So a simple drill you could do for that is simply having your hand come under the basketball and just working on repping that out at first. And then after that, you can work on just shooting the basketball straight up and having it try to land back down by you, keeping that arm up from the shooting hand and that guide hand up as well. So you know you're being consistent with that release, that you're swooping under the basketball, and that you're not pushing the basketball left or right, because if it comes straight down, that means you're doing a pretty good job of that. One other thing you could pay attention to is how the basketball spins. You want it to spin almost exactly this way. So if you can get your hand right here on the drill so the basketball is not turned sideways and it's completely straight with the lines perpendicular to where your hand is, then you'll know a lot better if you're getting that perfect rotation. On that release, you'd want one of 3 things to happen. You'd either want this pointer finger to touch the basketball last, your middle finger, or sort of both with a split finger release. Simple thing you can do to make sure you're doing that part right is that same last drill, but at the end, focus on either having your pointer and your thumb touch to each other, if that's the finger you're trying to release with. If you're trying to do your middle finger, then do that one. If you're trying to do the split, have your thumb come right between those 2 fingers like that. So it would look something like this. That's me doing the pointer finger. Okay, once you're solid with all those things, we're ready to start shooting with the hoop. So the first thing you would want to do with the hoop is always start close. Even if you're advanced, I recommend every player do this for their warm-up at least. If you're a beginner, maybe you're not going to move back much further than that. So you would come next to the hoop. There's 2 simple drills you can do. They're classics, and I recommend every player does them because they work. The first is that do one hand form shooting. This will make sure you're not having any of those guide hand interference issues, and that you're getting the power from the shooting hand, you get the touch and the feel with that hand, and you'll get that release feeling right. So you would simply have your hand here like this under the basketball, and you would just rotate it under. So you have to really make sure, especially if you're a younger player, that you might not have the biggest hand, so it might fall off your hand if you're not doing a good job of bending this wrist back. So this comes back to that part where I talked about swooping your hand under. Notice how that wrist comes back. This is gonna start to make sure that's a habit. Pick out a tiny target on the rim. I will link you to a video at the end on exactly what you should aim for, and it'll help you make a lot more shots instantly. But starting like this, putting that shot right in. The goal should be try to make it nothing but net. And the next drill you would want to do is the exact same thing. The only difference is you're going to have both hands on the basketball, paying attention to, like we did earlier, that guide hand is doing what it's supposed to do. Just like that. Once you've got a bunch of repetitions and close to the hoop, you can start stepping back a little further, possibly all the way out to the free throw line. Just make sure you get plenty of repetitions at each spot, because if you don't, that form might start getting weird. If you're back here and you're not comfortable with the shot, you don't have the power and the consistency with your shot, you might start throwing the basketball more, which isn't what we want to do. Here's the video on what you should aim for when you shoot.
The next video is the basic rules of basketball.
In this video, you'll learn the basic rules of basketball. Basketball is played on a rectangular court, which is 22 to 28 meters long and 13 to 15 meters wide. At each end of the court, there is a 45 centimeter wide hoop fixed on a panel suspended 3.05 meters above the ground, the basket. Two teams of 5 players compete over 4 quarters of 10 minutes each. A 15-minute halftime takes place between the second and the third quarter. The objective of both teams is to put the ball through the opponent's hoop to score as many points as possible. A scored shot, called a field goal, is worth 2 points, or 3 if the player has thrown the ball from outside the 3-point arc. The team with the highest score at the end of play wins the game. In case of a tie, the teams play 5-minute rounds in overtime until one team wins. To get the ball across the court, players can only move while dribbling. Or pass the ball, they are only allowed to use their hands. In offense, players can be sanctioned by violation, which leads to a turnover from behind the opponent's baseline. To learn more about it, check out our video on violations. In case of illegal contact, players can be sanctioned by fouls. To learn how not to commit them, watch our video on fouls. Fouls are sanctioned by turnovers or free shots for the opponent. Free throws are shot from a line placed near the edge of the key and are worth 1 point. The key, also called free throw lane, is the rectangular area drawn beneath both hoops. At each timeout, the coach may make substitutions. There is no limit to the number of players that can be substituted. Now you know the basic rules of basketball.
For our next activity, I want your class to answer the question in 10 minutes. Directions. Write 5 sentences in your sheet of paper on what have you learned and understand in basketball. Okay, class. Pass your paper in your front. At this point, I want everyone to participate for executing to tell what it is. If it is a position or basic rules. Who wants to volunteer? There have an additional points when you are participating. Okay, very good. Thank you, class. For our assignment for today, write a reflective essay. All about what have you learned today and experienced. It should be passing at the next meeting. Okay? Thank you, class, for attending and participating. I'm hoping you may go home safe and have a rest. Keep safe and God bless. Goodbye, class. Bye.